Hi everyone, my name is Hiromi Narita. I'm a Kirkwood Study Abroad Advisor. Today we're going to talk about one of the faculty's experience on leading study abroad programs. And we have Catherine here today. So thank you so much for joining us today. Yes. Do you want to introduce yourself, like what you did, where you went, and all about the stuff?
Certainly.
Yeah.
I'm Catherine Schaffstump. I'm a professor in communications, English, and media, where I teach composition and folklore. And I enjoy traveling. I have been to many places around the world, but I have taken students to Japan and to Vietnam.
Nice. Okay, so you just mentioned two different countries. So I assume it will be two different programs,
That's
right?
correct. Yes.
So can you tell me more about the Japan program first?
Certainly. We have a partnership with a program at the GK College Group where they actually have an animation school.
Mm.
And Kirkwood has a fairly active animation club. And so we took a trip to Japan to study how to draw and produce anime.
Oh my God, that is so fun. I love anime. I'm from Japan, but I have never learned that. So that sounds really exciting.
The students really loved it. They actually took classes for a week and produced their own mini comics. And then
Wow.
during the time they weren't taking classes, they toured animation studios, uh, the Ghibli Museum, several
Yeah.
places that had special exhibits about the pop culture of Japan. And they just thought it was fantastic.
Wow. That is so interesting. I wish we can do that again for so many students. Yeah.
Well, if there are other students who would like to go, I would love to take them.
Yeah. Do you have any like memorable experiences in Japan?
Oh, so many memorable experiences in
Yeah.
Japan. I just love going to Japan. In addition to going with the students, I've been several times. But what I think was perhaps the best for the students was when they actually got to see actual Japanese animators who were somewhat famous, who had made some of their own of the shows that they had watched. They really loved doing that. And
Mm.
then I enjoyed doing that too because I enjoy watching anime. But perhaps my most memorable experience on this particular trip was the barbecue that we had on the shores of Lake Hikone at the GK Center.
Mm.
We got a chance to see some of the natural beauty of Japan, in addition to being in Tokyo and seeing some of the traditional temples. So it was just nice to get outside and see how wonderful Lake Hikone was.
Wow. So you stayed in Tokyo capital area. Did you
Hmm.
go different places or you?
We did a little bit of traveling that second week. We were mostly based in Tokyo, doing the museums and exhibits, and we took a couple of day trips.
Mhm.
Like we went to Hakone for a day,
Yeah.
but then we sort of gathered up our things and we went off to see Kyoto and some of the more famous temples and shrines there. And then we ended up, on Lake Biwa, taking a wonderful look at the GK Center there and enjoying ourselves and GK's hospitality for the last parts of the trip.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I'm thinking about all those places you just mentioned, but I wish I can go there. Yeah, so since I'm from Japan, so I don't know how this experience impacted students' life, but if you observed anything, can you share?
The students were very interested in the differences in culture. So we
Mm.
had a lot of orientation before we went because, the students wanted to make a good impression. And so we talked a little bit about how things were different and similar in Japan. And so I think one of the best things for the students was the homestay section that we did on a weekend where they got
Mm.
a chance to actually see the wonderful life of just regular Japanese families.
Wow.
For me, it was really somewhat of a sense of pride because they actually learned a little Japanese while they were there. And when they were doing their homestay, they got to kind of negotiate being in the homestay with very little English using that tiny bit of Japanese that they had learned. So that was
Wow.
cool.
Wow. So, did students say anything about the difficulty in terms of the language difference?
Some of the students had more trouble than others.
Mm.
Other students were just, really gung ho to give it a shot.
Mm.
There were a couple of students who had studied Japanese in high school, so for them it wasn't a big problem. I actually had a friend who was older who went because he has a big interest in drawing animation. And he said that, while the language was problematic, there was a lot you could communicate without language skills,
Mm.
basically how to get along with people and how to convey that you were happy and to take trips together. So, language is sometimes important, but sometimes not as important.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can totally, yeah, get that. Wow. I feel like we can do whole different episode about just talking about manga and an anime, but
Yeah, for
we can
sure.
definitely do it. But I want to learn more about the other program you did too.
Yes.
So that was
Yes.
Vietnam.
Yes. Now, the Vietnam trip was part of the GEN consortium.
Mm-hmm.
So, for people who don't know what GEN is, it's sort of a group of people from Australia, Canada, here at Kirkwood, and Singapore
Right,
who get together to do many good deeds in the world.
right.
And this particular trip was a trip to Vietnam where we would remodel a school. So,
Mm.
we were actually housed in like a very small town in Vietnam. We started in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City.
Mm.
Well, actually, we started in Singapore. We went to Singapore and we went to our host college, and they did a lot of teamship training. And then we went to Vietnam and built this school, remodeled it, put in new windows, put in new tiles, painted it, and
Wow.
it was hard work.
Yeah.
It was definitely very different than the Japanese trip. It was a service learning trip. I took
Mm.
3 students from Kirkwood, and they were just amazing.
Mm.
They got along really well with everyone, they were open to all the cultural experiences, and they worked super hard. And
Mm.
then after we finished the school, there was a big celebration in the town. There was dancing and lots of wonderful, enjoyable food, and we spent a couple of days doing a little bit of sightseeing before we
Mm.
returned to the US.
So, you mentioned briefly you've been to Japan several times. You definitely took students there, and now you went to Vietnam.
Mhm.
Did you experience any like culture shock?
So, I have experienced culture shock in all of the different places that I've gone,
Yeah.
right? Less so in Japan because I have many Japanese friends and I was better
Mm.
prepared, but Vietnam quite a bit, really. It was more quiet, more rural. People weren't used to seeing people like us.
Um.
One of the things that happened was I was trying to like haul wheelbarrows and do work, and I was actually ignored by the workmen because they did
Oh.
not see that as a woman's role.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
I guess there's a definite more defining of gender roles there than there is in our country, and I had to sort of acclimate to that idea. So, instead
Mm.
of being able to haul wheelbarrows and tear things down, I sort of shifted my focus into painting and doing things that they
Mm.
considered were more appropriate for women.
Mm.
Because I mean, you can argue that point,
Mm.
but it's still not gonna change anything, so you had to do kind of what was good for the trip. So, yeah, there
Right.
was a little bit more culture shock there.
Yeah, that's interesting. How about any students? Did they say anything about culture shock?
So, a couple of my students were kinda surprised. We stayed at a really nice hotel in the area, but at that time, there was a governmental conference,
Mm.
and, there were a lot of military people around because, Vietnam is, very strict in regards to its government, and the students were a little bit freaked out by that because it seemed
Oh.
like, it was sort of scary for them.
Mm.
And then another thing that we experienced is that occasionally our power would go out.
Oh,
And
okay.
so the students were, the Singaporean students especially were very, very, you know, concerned about that,
Yeah.
And there were these tiny little geckos, these little lizards that lived on the ceiling sometimes.
Uh-huh.
And some students were worried that they would fall down and on them when they slept.
I
But
can see that.
that didn't happen. They were very good roommates.
Yeah.
They behaved themselves very well.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, I personally have never been to Vietnam, but that sounds really interesting.
So
Yeah.
it's a very pretty country.
Yeah.
I mean, it's developing. So, there's not quite as much, I would say, urban stuff to see. But one of the tours we did was a beautiful walk around and see agriculture areas and see some local traditional folk art industries. And I mean, the scenery is just breathtaking. The
Yeah.
kinds of agricultural products they have there are delicious. If you want to do a fruit tasting tour of any country, Vietnam is the place to go. Seriously. So it had its certain attractions, very different than going to a place like Japan for sure, or coming to the United States.
Right.
But still, I think a good trip to remind you of how close people need to be to nature and the land.
Wow. That's so great. So you did this it was a service focused program,
That's
right?
correct.
Uh, do you think that impacted you in certain way as a faculty leader?
Oh, sure. I
Yeah.
mean, most of the traveling that I have been doing in my life is for business or maybe for education because I am a
Mm-hmm.
faculty member.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really nice to go to a country and work toward a goal with your hands to contribute to something that was for a community's greater good.
Yeah.
And in a way, it was like here we were donating time and labor to a task that they could have done, but we were there to do it quickly and give it as a gift.
Mm.
So I felt very touched by the overall focus of the trip and the industry of the students and the receptivity of the community.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. Do you like stay in touch with the students you took for the trips?
Actually, one of the students works here.
Right.
Janelle works here now after the trip. When she started with us on the trip, she was a horticulture student. She was specializing in the floral program. And part of the trip, she was trying to decide whether she wanted to go back and get a degree or not. And I think largely because of that trip, she made a change in her career. And fate would have it, she ended up working here at Kirkwood. So we see
Right.
each other and have lunch sometimes and
Yeah.
just talk about that experience and how her career is going, this kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's quite lovely to have seen that influence.
Mm.
The other two guys that I went on, one went on to Iowa State and got his degree and did pretty well. And the other one actually took a study abroad in Brazil for a longer term. So he was impacted by the trip in such a way that he wanted to travel and see more of the world. So
Wow.
all three of the students, I think were pretty successful after the
Wow.
trip.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So, I would like to know, so as a faculty who led this program, do you have any message to other Kirkwood faculty or staff member who are thinking about doing a program or leading a program?
So I have lots of things to say, but since we have a limited amount of time, I will try to be selective. First of all, I think taking students abroad is a way to make them truly aware of how what they are learning here at Kirkwood impacts the world, not just Eastern Iowa.
Mm,
And Kirkwood has such a well-developed, department to help you really make a program that you would like when you take
right.
students abroad. It also has so many programs that you can participate in because we have special ways for faculty to participate. Even though I was the lead faculty on the trip to Vietnam, I started as a faculty who was supposed to go along just as a student because I had
Mm,
received a special scholarship to do that.
uh-huh.
So, it's really easy to go abroad here. It's also great for you if you're at a point in your career where you feel like you would need a new challenge. You would like to see how people do what you do every day in another country. It's a really nice way to sort of breathe new life into your career, especially as we progress through the years and we feel like maybe we're kind of doing the same thing over and over. So it's
Yeah.
good for you. It's good for the students. It's good for your teaching. It's really good for everything.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much. So, I would like to wrap up this conversation if you'd like to add anything else.
Well, if students are thinking about going abroad, they really
Yeah.
should. Kirkwood has this like fantastic department that I mentioned before, and so many opportunities. When I was an undergraduate, I did not think it was an affordable thing. And so I
Yeah.
actually started traveling as a student when I went back for my PhD. But one of the things that being here has taught me is that it's not too expensive.
Mm.
I have students who have gone who have received scholarships, or we find that studying abroad is something that you can actually use financial aid towards
Yeah.
sometimes. So, the opportunity of going abroad and learning something about the larger world you're part of is really super for an undergraduate. It's the best time in your life. It's the time when you have the least ties and you will learn so much. So,
Right.
all the students who are thinking about it, just do it. It's really
Right.
great.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing your experience. I really appreciate it. Yes. And then again, as Catherine said, we have a lot of great opportunities at Kirkus. So if you have any questions about international education or study abroad, reach out to Global Learning. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.